There is a lot of money to be made in Illuvium Zero if you know what you're doing. Illuvium Zero just became a whole lot more complicated, and after a few weeks of playing the game, I have a fantastic understanding of exactly how it all works. If you own an Illuvium Zero Land NFT, you now have the opportunity to sell your fuel for real money. Even if you don't, learning these details will be important to maximize the ILV airdrop for those of you playing for free. Since the launch hype cycle will be the strongest in the early days of Illuvium, a majority of the money for land holders could come quickly. This video will prepare you. I will also describe one extremely important detail that will make a huge difference in just how much fuel you output. But first, let me ask you a fun question. Which land tier used to have the best ROI in Illuvium Zero? Comment your answer down below and I'll get to it later in the video. Illuvium Zero has a wide array of buildings, strategies, and tasks for you to accomplish as you progress your city. I will cover many of the beginner aspects like the different building types, which ones to build, and how to organize them all on your land. After this, I will briefly touch on the more complex ideas such as research, blueprints, and maximizing your fuel output. Before all that, we need to clearly define the goals of the games and briefly touch on the different land tiers. Every player will need to build a nexus, engineering workshop, and later on, a quantum fabricant. There's a few key rules here. No buildings in your base can surpass the level of your nexus, and the same goes for most buildings and the engineering workshop, with the quantum fabricant limiting fuel-based buildings. Ultimately, leveling your nexus will allow you to then upgrade every other building in your city and expand your maximum buildings, giving you the opportunity to expand. So now let's go over the tiers. Tier 1 lands have 1 fuel site, Tier 2 has 3, then 6 and 9 on a Tier 4. They will slightly adjust the way you play the game, but what is most important is maximizing how you weave converters in with the efficiency boosts from your harvesters. I will explain this in more detail a bit later in the video. As for navigating the game and getting started, the game is quite simple. The hamburger menu in the top left will allow you to access the settings, your other plots, and see some general stats about your city. In the bottom left, you can see your current production queues in the activity tab and your goals, which will allow you to gain resources for free and level up. Going for the objectives in the main tab is a good guideline of what to do next at any stage of the game. In the bottom right, you have the shop, which will allow you to buy credits for speed ups and extra builders. For any landowner, I recommend getting at least 1 extra builder for any tier, and if you can afford it for a tier 3 and tier 4 land plot in particular, it will greatly benefit from the 3rd builder as well. Lastly, we have the build menu in the bottom right, which allows you to build new structures and roads. We will detail each one later, but here are some first steps to playing the game. Build harvesters on your element sites and then click on the building. Depending on the harvester, you can then excavate, mine, or pump new resources and even toggle on the repeat function. To disable this repeat function, simply go to the activity tab and toggle it off. To start, build a nexus, engineering workshop, and as many harvesters as you can on your plot, and converters to fill in the gaps. For example, if you only have 1 carbon site, you might want to build converters for hydrogen and silicon, which will passively generate new resources. You can then use the Nexus airdrop if you ever get stuck without enough resources. You can do this once every 24 hours. Now, after this, move on to the Nexus and Engineering Workshop level 2, and so on and so forth. At each level, you should be trying to maximize as many buildings as you can, but for those with the higher tier plots, they produce so much that you don't need to be too stringent with it. I will now explain the other elements of the game to help you understand and strategize as you develop your city. There are 3 elements and 3 fuels in the game. You will need silicon, carbon, and hydrogen to build up your base and acquire fuel later on. Those are the elements. And if you own land, Solon, Krypton, and Hyperion will also allow you to earn Ethereum as you sell them to the marketplace. It is also used to upgrade your entire city and progress into the later stages of the game. There are 4 core building types in the game that are relevant for every single player. We will discuss some of the more advanced buildings a little bit later in the video, but remember, this is a little bit more of a beginner's guide. Harvesters. They are the core component of your Illuvium land. They will outproduce every other building you have. Once more time, they will outproduce everything else. They are also the best source of efficiency boosts, but more on that later. Converters can serve 2 benefits in your city. They allow you to swap between resources at a 25% loss in case you have a serious imbalance in fuel or element sites. In my case, I have a lot of Solon. They also passively generate resources. Now, this can feel quite slow, but as you get later onto the game, it's not too bad. You will need many element converters to progress, but fuel converters are very slow and need to be managed more carefully. As for storages, they are important, but you need a certain amount at any given time to be able to upgrade your Nexus. For example, if your Nexus needs 10,000 carbon to upgrade, you will need to build carbon storages to allow you to reach that number. Storages don't actively produce anything, and if you have too many, it can take up valuable space on your land. I tend to try and max out at 2 for each element storages or 1 or 2 for the fuel storages, depending on my strategy. The general rule of thumb is if my best upgrade costs 100,000 carbon and 2 storages allows that, then I will have 2 storages. I don't need more, and so I will not build more. That is the most important rule here. As for power plants, they will make up the vast majority of your base's buildings, and in previous betas, it was pretty much half of my buildings were power plants. Given they have high efficiency and boost the efficiency for all of your buildings, and the power is such an integral part of the game now. The 2 core mechanics that will determine just how many resources you can produce and greatly affect how fast your city will build up are power and efficiency. You can toggle them in the bottom right to see kind of how your buildings are doing with all this. Power is simple. Your buildings require power to run, and the higher level your buildings, the more power they need. To increase the power on your plot, you simply need to upgrade your power plants and try to place them in the vicinity. There are 3 major rules when it comes to boosting efficiency. Power plants provide efficiency, especially when right up against buildings. You can see a serious difference, trust me. And harvesters provide an efficiency buff to converters of the same type. You can place converters an equal distance away from harvesters in different directions to try and maximize this buff, because converters reduce the efficiency of other nearby converters. How many times can I say converters in one sentence? I don't believe fuel converters affect element converters, but they all affect each other negatively. To reduce this impact, you can either spread out the converters on your land or place a ton of power plants everywhere and just try to mitigate it that way. The power plant strategy tends to maximize space better because there really isn't that much space in the end. And the other mechanic you need to consider is roads. The only rule that matters for roads is every building touching a singular road piece will add to the road score. The more buildings will reduce the time to upgrade buildings and to do actions. The more buildings you have connected, this will reduce the time to upgrade buildings and do actions for everything. The time to harvest resources, the time to convert, and even the time to passively generate resources will all be reduced. With a 5% reduction at Nexus 5, for example, you can turn your 24 hours into 22.8 hours on every single fuel harvester, which is very, very powerful. As mentioned before, there are 2 key ways to play Illuvium Zero: fuel generation and researching blueprints. To research blueprints, you need to first discover alluvials with a scanner and then get lucky enough to find biodata using the material lab. After this, use the 0-point transducer to actually mint the NFTs on the blockchain. After you do this, you can use it to craft special cosmetic items for your ranger in the Illuvium overworld. This is hard to combo with fuel generation because scanners lose efficiency really quickly when they are near any other building. However, you still need fuel to run all of the research buildings, so you have to do a combination if you're going for blueprints. As for fuel, it's simple: stack converters and power plants for passive generation, keeping only one thing in mind. The most crucial part of playing Illuvium Zero is now making roads as efficient as possible. Every single tile on your Illuvium Zero game is of serious importance. Do not waste space. By ensuring the roads touch every single building, but doesn't have any extra pieces, will maximize your buildings, their space, and the reduction in fuel generation. If your fuel harvester produces 20 fuel every 24 hours, and you manage to knock off 3 or so hours, you now produce about 15% more than the other players in Illuvium. Compound that with the added buildings to your land, and the boost is insane. Use the link in the description below to get playing the game today, and please don't forget to use the code SCORYOX in the settings to show me support as a creator. It means a lot. Remember when I asked you which land tier had the best ROI? Well, it was a tier 1 land, simply because of the way converters function. I don't think that's the same anymore. Now, if you're interested in Illuvium beginner guides like this one, then please like and subscribe for more. And after this, you should definitely watch my beginner guide to farming shards in the Illuvium overworld right up there.